It's the year 330, and Christianity is the new hot religion on the scene. And loving Jesus has just been legalized. However, this brand new religion isn't entirely new. Its earliest converts came out of Judaism. And over its first couple of centuries, it interacted a lot with Platonic philosophies. The newness of this religion aside, we certainly ended up with a lot of new music, even though much of it wouldn't be written down for another 800 years or so. Music in the early Western Church was quite a controversial topic, with the early church fathers having quite a lot to say about it. On the one hand, the Old Testament says plenty about worship through music. On the other hand, to a lot of these church fathers, music was associated with pagan festivals and all manner of debauchery. They would say things like, "You should only listen to Southern gospel music and stay away from that devil rock and roll music." Things like, "You should only sing psalms and stay away from that devil pagan music." It's a 2,000-year-old recurring theme in church music. But we want to avoid the devil in music. That makes sense. Fast forward 18 centuries and the tritone has become associated with the devil. But was the tritone ever actually banned? And what does everyone mean by banned, or prohibited, or forbidden? And why does everyone think that it was banned? That has to come from somewhere. I've even said it on this channel before being rebuked by Adam Neely. So today I fully intend to find out to what extent the tritone was prohibited, and if it wasn't, who started that myth? That means that we'll need to look at the relationship of the early Christian church to music and philosophy, as well as music theory versus music practice. I personally first heard of the tritone ban in my college music history class. Let me see if I can remember what my professor said. Yes. God will smite you for that be natural. You know, I have really got to come up with a title sequence for this series. Let's trace the idea as far back as we can. Joseph Fuchs in the 18th century puts this well-known mnemonic phrase into his counterpoint book. For those of you who don't read Latin, this translates to "me against fa is the devil in music." This saying, of course, is not of his own creation, and in fact he attributes it to the ancients. And me contra fa is a reference to Guido's hexachordal system, which developed in around the 11th century. So clearly those in earlier times had some sort of knowledge of this saying, although there's not documented evidence of this saying until the 18th century. But was it banned? Often when I'm doing music history research, I like to start with the encyclopedias to get an overview of a topic. So it was one of my first stops when I was revisiting the tritone. The current definition of the tritone, according to the Oxford Music Dictionary online, states that the tritone was explicitly prohibited in the hexachordal system. Okay, well, that's something. At the very least, we can see where confusion would arise. So I wandered down to the university library to see if I could find previous editions of Oxford, and let me tell you, it is a journey. The 1947 Companion to Music says that the tritone is not beautiful, and it was forbidden melodically in church music, and that the augmented fourth is worse than the diminished fifth. The 1980 edition says it was prohibited in medieval times, and so it does in 1985, and again in 2007, but the 1983 Companion to Music says that it was forbidden in the harmonic sense. After all, it's me against fa is the devil in music, not me before fa. But unfortunately, none of these dictionaries listed their sources. Thanks for nothing. You've been about as helpful as a concrete parachute. What do you mean it was prohibited? Like, illegal? Prohibited on whose authority? Despite some contradictory information, all of them seem to agree that 1, there was a ban by some definition, and 2, this ban happened in the church. Those heathens can play whatever intervals they want. Christianity shows up somewhere near the year 33. Why somewhere near? Because even though they tried to restructure the entire system for numbering years around the birth of Jesus, they messed it up, and Jesus was more than likely born 4 years before Christ. But being that the Roman Empire was rather well connected, all roads lead to Rome after all, this new religion spreads across the empire and even thrives despite heavy persecution from the Roman Empire. Within 25 years, Christianity has made it at least as far as Rome, as we know that the Apostle Paul wrote a letter to the church in Rome around the year 57. The New Testament book of Acts also records the church going as far south as Ethiopia. In 313, Constantine officially legalized Christianity. Although it had not become the official religion of the Roman Empire yet, that would happen in 380. But with the Edict of Milan, it legalized Christianity, so you weren't going to be killed for practicing it. But almost immediately Constantine gets sick of the Christians arguing about everything, and so he calls a council to talk about all of those arguments so that we can make everyone come to an agreement on everything, and then we'll never have arguments about anything ever again forever. Obviously this didn't work, but they did figure out some important things. They codified those things in the Nicene Creed, and they also figured out what date Easter should be on, and after that they all got along. Just kidding. They kicked the losing side out of the church, sent them into exile, and a few years later they had to have another council because of more arguing. You'll see that the church loves these ecumenical councils, and they just about all go something like this.
Oh, this can be fixed. As good as new.
After the fall of Rome, the Pope enjoyed about a century of not being micromanaged by an empire. That changed in 537 when Justinian of the Eastern Roman Empire came back through and reconquered Rome, fired the Pope, and installed a Pope of his own. And thanks to a series of problems that will be enumerated in a later episode, the Pope and the church government in Rome were thoroughly done being treated like the emperor's younger brother. So when the Lombards began threatening Rome, the Pope looked to France for help. This began a centuries-long alliance between the Papal States and the Carolingian Empire. Carolingian? Carolingian. Okay, look, sometimes I write stuff in the script and forget I'm actually going to have to say it out loud later. And then on Christmas Day in the year 800, in a rather controversial move, the Pope personally crowned Charlemagne Emperor of the Roman Empire. It's this alliance that will shape the course of Western music history going forward. The New Testament does not say very much in the way of music. Most notably, Paul writes to the Ephesians to address one another in psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs, singing and making melody to the Lord with your heart. What he means by psalms is seemingly obvious, the 150 songs that are recorded in the Hebrew Old Testament. But what he means by hymns and spiritual songs is less defined. And much could be said about the influence of Platonic philosophy on early Christian thought, but for our purposes today, we can see a parallel between Plato and the early church fathers and their beliefs and thoughts on the power and purpose of music. For example, the power of music to shape character, or how particular music was either morally good or bad. By the 3rd century, we see a collection of songs sung by the early church, many of them using text from the Bible, but in particular Phos Ileron does not. It is perhaps the oldest surviving extra-biblical hymn we have from the early church, and it has remained in the liturgy of many different Christian traditions around the world. Anyway, this alliance between the Pope and Charlemagne kicked off a period of stability in France, which led to the Carolingian Renaissance, in which art and music thrived. And thanks to standardization efforts from both the church and the states, we saw the rise of educational programs. This education happened primarily within the church, and within a few centuries it would lead to the first European universities. Charlemagne brought in a scholar from England to help with these standardization efforts. So Albinus of York brought back the 7 subjects of the Greek education system, including the quadrivium, the mathematical sciences that included music. With the absence of any sort of standard notation, music had to be studied entirely in the abstract, namely using Pythagorean ratios. This kept the study of music both general and theoretical, almost entirely separate from music in practice. In a later video, we will look at the Franconian monks and their attempt to bridge the gap between music theory and music practice. But this study of music, much like the study of music in ancient Greece, was examined from both mathematical and philosophical perspectives. And so both Pythagorean and Platonic ideals lived on in the world of 9th century France. In the Platonic view, music could be used to shape character, good music leading to good behavior and bad music leading to bad behavior. This can also clearly be seen in the writings of the early church fathers. Music, especially instrumental music, was associated with pagan festivals. These pagan festivals had many activities that the church objected to, and therefore, by association, they objected to its music as well. In this particular context, we see the seeds for the devil in music. For since the devil generally lies in wait at banquets, having his allies in drunkenness and gluttony, it is necessary especially then to construct a defense against him from the Psalms and to sing sacred hymns to God. Those who introduce actors, dancers, and prostitutes into banquets also summon their demons and the devil and fill their homes with every manner of discord. And you may remember the aulos, which was considered by some in Greek society to be bad because of its association with a half-man, half-animal. Likewise, by some in the early church, the aulos was a representation of the serpent, who, according to the book of Genesis, deceived Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. So at this point, we don't so much see a concrete representation of the devil within music, such as the tritone, but we do see metaphorically that God is seen in perfect harmonies and the devil in dissonant ones. Therefore, how do you reconcile a rejection of music with a dedicated study of music? Some in the church did recognize that music could play multiple functions, and indeed could be used to better understand the Bible. We must nevertheless shun music because of the superstition of the heathen, if we are able to snatch anything from it useful for the understanding of the Holy Scriptures. In that light, the pure mathematical properties of music were considered to be of the divine order, and pagan music, therefore, was considered a distortion of that divine order. It does make me wonder, parenthetically, how Pythagoreans would have viewed the tritone. I mean, they like small whole number ratios. And sure, 64 to 45, which is the diminished fifth, is a rather large ratio, but in some other regards, 7 to 5 is also a version of the tritone. Would they be okay with that? That's a small whole number ratio. Did they find that to just be too out of tune to be a tritone? Did they not want to deal with 7-limit intonation? I don't know. Tell me your favorite ratio for the tritone in the comments. In addition to music that was specifically written for church services, we see the creation of the morality play by Hildegard von Bingen in the mid-1100s. Her play Ordo Virtutum explores the struggle of a particular human soul to be won by either the virtues or the devil. Eastern and Western church music looked very similar to begin with, and that makes sense. However, these two traditions would grow further and further apart over the course of the first 1,000 years of Christianity. So what was the church actually singing? Because of their views on music, the Psalms were used in most church services as these were known to be safe. Now, David, the composer of many Psalms, urged people to the truth and dissuaded them from idolatry. Indeed, he was so far from hymning demons that they were actually put to flight by his music. For example, the evening service of prayer, known as Vespers, included the setting of 4 psalms. A major contributor to both Eastern and Western traditions is Pope Gregory I, who, according to legend, composed all of the chants under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit in the form of a dove on his shoulder. Okay, so one account actually says that the dove stuck his beak in old Greg's mouth, and I'm not really comfortable with that. This is almost certainly legendary. The standardization efforts from both the church and the state meant that the liturgy needed to be constant across all of Western Christianity. So the Gregorian legend was probably the creation of the Southern Italian church trying to prove superiority to the Northern French Rite. And if you're ever trying to win an argument, playing the Inspired by God card usually works. A few episodes from now, we will look at how this standardization effort led to the first Western notation. However, there doesn't seem to be any edict from the church banning the tritone. And believe me, if the Pope wanted something banned, it got banned. Thanks for watching. YouTube allows viewers to sign up for a lifetime subscription to this channel absolutely free, so why would you not? But if you have benefited from my work and would like to make a contribution, please check out my Patreon page. Let me know in the comments which video you'd like to see next. You can also connect with me on social media or sign up for my newsletter to be the first to know what's happening. I'll see you next time.